We only had one day that Monday was the only day when nobody used it. We gave it a break. Just last week, our church facility has been used 6 out of 7 days. One night it was used by Celebrate Recovery. They're not members of Redeemer, but they have a heart and a passion to help people with addiction. 2 other groups, an organization called Lighthouse Via de Cristo, kind of like a group that's dedicated to doing these spiritual retreat weekends. They've been doing a lot of their leadership training using our facility. And then just recently, I had a personal trainer who said, "Hey, I'd really like to use your facility because the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit." We're trying to do everything that we can to serve the community. We do not exist for ourselves. And as soon as we do exist for ourselves, then we cease to actually do the heartbeat that God has for us. 6 days shall you work. And on the 7th, it just happened to be the 7th day was on a Monday.
Welcome back to the Christians of Brevard Pastor Podcast. I'm here with Pastor Gary Ginn of Redeemer Church in Titusville. They are a Presbyterian congregation affiliated with the PCA, or the Presbyterian Church in America. Pastor Gary is the founding pastor and started the church back in 2007. They were a plant of Christ Community Presbyterian just north of them there, also in Titusville. Pastor Gary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Connor. How are you doing?
I'm doing well myself. Appreciate you joining the Pastor Podcast.
It's a joy to be here.
Well, maybe just to jump in, you can tell us the story of how Redeemer was started and what led you and your wife to plant the church.
Sure. Actually, it started back in 1997. I was in seminary at RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, and I had just completed my first year in Master of Divinity Studies. And I knew that I needed some ministry experience. And so I started looking around at different opportunities to get with a church. And I saw a youth ministry, part time youth ministry position open up at Christ Community Church in Titusville. And so um, I applied for it. I wore flip flops the day that I visited the church. And one of the elders said, "Hey, I really like a guy that wears flip flops." And at any rate, it was fun getting to know those guys. I spent about a year and a half with them before deciding to really press on full time in my studies. And so I left Christ Community in 1998, finished up my degree, and then got another little temporary position in Ocala, serving part time or actually full time with middle school youth until, lo and behold, Christ Community Church was looking for a church planter back in 2002, 2003 timeframe. And so we just started talking about what a new church in Brevard County might look like. And in July or August of 2004, my wife and I, and then just one child, his name is Jack, we moved from Ocala um, to Titusville to start working towards building a church here in Titusville. So with Christ Community.
What was kind of the thought process that led to the church, them Christ Community wanting to plant the church? I was looking it up. It's just about 10 minutes south of Christ Community. So you guys are fairly close there. Is it a different community, or what's the thought?
Well, the thought process was at the time there was a Christ Community had really grown. Sadly, they had grown through a kind of a church split from a lot of folks down here in Port St. John, which is where I live. A lot of the
Mm.
families actually started attending Christ Community. And so they were started to bust at the seams. And I loved when I was interviewing with them, one of the things that they talked about is we could put our money into bricks and mortar and we could build out our place, but it was at a time when they said, we can probably do a lot more good if we actually planted a new church. We could raise up new leadership and so on and so forth. And so that's what they decided to do.
Mhm.
And so they brought me on board so that I would be the church planting apprentice for a couple of years, get some more experience under my belt, particularly in the area of preaching and teaching before they launched us out with a core group. And so
Mhm.
that's how that came to be, so that we were able to leave there with a core group of about, I don't know, 7 or 8 families back in 2006. And we had a 6-month period where we were doing some leadership training, just trying to get all of our ducks in a row, planning for our first worship service, which we ended up having the last Sunday in February of 2007.
And did you guys, build that building there, or how did you acquire the land?
We actually looked all over Port St. John for a place to have our meetings. However, everything, literally everything at that time was at way, way, way out of our price range. You might remember that was about the time when the housing market was about to crash.
I was gonna say, if you
No,
just waited maybe a little bit, you would have caught the crash.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible. So we tried and tried. Finally ended up getting something in South Titusville. Actually, we met right down the street from the Titusville Police Department, just off of 405 in the corner of Grissom Parkway. We met there for like 2 years. We rented the old Ebon building, is what it's called, and we were there for a couple of years, and then we kind of ended our lease there, and we ended up moving just a little bit north, about a mile and a half north, a little closer to home church, in 2009 when we settled in at the Seventh Day Adventist Church. And we were there for a while. We like to call ourselves the Ninja Church because if you did not show up on a Sunday morning around 10 o'clock and see our banners, you would have never known that we were in there. And so, but now, 10 years, as a matter of fact, on our 10th anniversary, we were able to purchase the building that we're currently in there on South Park Avenue in Titusville.
So you bought the building on the 10th year anniversary, and now we just talked before the podcast, you're approaching your 18th anniversary at the end of this month. This is February, we're recording this, so
Yeah,
by the time this airs, you guys will just pass your 18th anniversary.
that's correct.
How has the church grown and formed over the years?
Well, it's been a process. There've been great days and there've been horrible days. There's a bit to be said about there's quite a bit of transiency, still, with a lot of jobs coming in, but a lot of jobs also going out. If you were to take all of our numbers over the years, we probably have 3 or 400 people, worshiping with us, but a lot of them we've actually sent on to other locations where they can go and serve other churches in some capacity, whether it's in Huntsville, Alabama with engineering, or Orlando with crew and Campus Crusade for Christ, and all kinds of different ministries and different opportunities that people are having. So we kind of pride ourselves on being a small church. And really loving people well, serving people well where they are. And so it's been an up and down, uh,
Mhm.
beautiful, beautiful. I wouldn't change it for anything kind of ride.
This is actually the first time I've been able to interview a Presbyterian pastor. So maybe we can dive a little bit into what makes Presbyterianism different, or maybe it would be a different experience from somebody who might be used to a Baptist church, or just last podcast we shared about a Lutheran church. What kind of makes Presbyterianism unique?
Well, I mean, we have certainly close ties with our brothers in the Lutheran Church, as well as close ties with brothers in the Baptist Church. But, we are a Reformed congregation. Um, we hold to the doctrines of Calvinism, and things of that nature, sovereignty of God. In salvation and all of those sorts of things. And so, at a Presbyterian church, what you're going to find at our church is you're going to find a very winsomely, uh, evangelistic group of people. I think sometimes Calvinism gets a bad name, a bad rap, being the frozen chosen and all, but when you understand, or at least my understanding of Presbyterianism and Calvinism, is that it is the most comforting of all religions, or denominations, primarily because my life is in God's hands. Ultimately, I trust in His sovereignty and His goodness, His purposes. He works all things together for good, according to for those whom He loves, according to His good purposes. including my salvation. And so I don't, I trust His care and wisdom far more than I trust my own. And so I'm okay with that. I'm content with that. But Presbyterianism is, I mean, we do a lot of the similar things to some of our other brothers in other denominations, particularly Lutheran. You know, our liturgy, our worship is very similar in the sense that we have like a call to worship, prayer of confession, assurance of salvation. We administer the sacraments and so forth. The other thing I love about it is that we're connected. In a very specific way. You know, we're a daughter church of our mother church, which is only 10 minutes away, and we're also part of a local group of churches, a presbytery, um, of probably 35 other churches, and so we get together frequently to help ordain other pastors, make sure that they are meeting all the credentials, um, and to encourage one another, and to maybe even address some of the issues related to our day from time to time.
What does the presbytery include geographically, I guess? You said 35 churches. So Brevard County, is all of Brevard County included in your presbytery?
Yeah, all of Brevard County is included. As a matter of fact, our geographical boundary would run from we've got one outlier church down in Indian River County in Vero Beach. That's a PCA church. And that would go sort of jaunt all the way northward to Ormond Beach, and then over to Ocala, and then back down sort of the West Coast, Crystal River area, and then all the way back almost just north of Tampa, Newport Richey, and then back to Orlando. So it encompasses all of the churches in Orlando as well, and then of course back down to Vero Beach. So it's a pretty nice, pretty big swath of area. And like I said, about 35 churches in that area. Most of them, however, do reside in the Orange County area, Lake County, a couple in Volusia County, a couple in Marion County, and Sumter County.
Yeah, I'm aware in Brevard County of obviously you guys, Redeemer, Christ Community, both up there in Titusville, and down here south we have Covenant Presbyterian,
Right.
and they've also planted a number of churches down here,
Yeah.
Presbyterian churches, Lake Washington area. I think that's Northside Presbyterian. I think there's a couple others. There's probably a good, I would say, is this true? Maybe 5 or 6 Presbyterian churches here in Brevard County.
Yeah, that's about right. 5 or
Yeah,
6.
and that would be PCA Presbyterian,
Mhm.
obviously. So there are different flavors of Presbyterianism out
Right.
there, but you guys all Presbyterian Church in America,
Right.
your presbytery includes PCA churches.
That is correct.
And are all PCA churches considered reformed?
Yeah, they're all gonna come they're gonna all have sort of the same flavor, if you will. Theologically, they're gonna be coming from the same strand of thought, and doctrine, but they may have different styles. Like, for example, our style at Redeemer is a little bit different than our brothers and sisters up at Christ Community Church. We have a slightly younger population, and so we may do more contemporary worship style, for example, rather than the more traditional. It just depends, and that's a congregational decision. How do they want to express the gospel in their context? And so that's a philosophical issue more than anything else.
Yeah, I've heard Presbyterianism is Scottish.
Yeah,
Is that right? Is that accurate?
that is correct.
Okay, so
Home of John
Lutheranism kind of
Knox.
comes from the Germans,
Yeah,
and Presbyterianism comes from the Scots.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the history of the Presbyterian Church in America, I mean, I don't know how far it goes back, but PCA came out of PCUSA at some point in the past. Is that true? Okay.
1973.
1973. Okay. Does Presbyterianism see itself collectively in some form, or is it really just the PCA that works together closely today?
Well, the closely it is the PCA. We're gonna work, very, very closely together. I mean, there are some theological differences, of course, that,
For sure.
led to the different or the split between, the PCUSA and, of course, ultimately, all of the churches that left, in 1973 to form the PCA.
And the
And so
PCA is a much more conservative denomination
that
than
is
the
correct.
PCUSA.
Yeah.
So have you had, I know you work with your presbytery, have you had any significant opportunities to work with other churches there locally in Titusville, collaborate on anything significant?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we from sort of our infancy time, probably 5 years into, and that's probably toddler days, maybe better than infancy, but, uh, I was part of a pastor's prayer group that started, um, with guys from Indian River City United Methodist Church, guys from various Baptist churches in town, Lutheran, you name it. There's probably, I think it started with about 7 or 8 of us, even Assemblies of God. We got together and we just started praying for our community. It ended up getting to be rather large, and so we did various things together before COVID hit. One of those things called the Church is One in North Brevard. And so we just came together to do various events, worship times, and so on and so forth. There was a time when a couple of us, we traded pastorates for the day. So I went and preached at a good friend's congregation, his church one day, and he came and he preached at mine one day, and things of that nature. So yeah, we've had opportunities to be a little bit more ecumenical, if you will.
And today, has Redeemer done to impact the local area?
Well, I mean, there's several things that we are trying to do. One of the things that um, motivates us is we try to be what I like to call winsomely evangelistic. You've been to our church, Connor, so you know what it's like to walk in the doors. People are warmly welcomed and greeted. We live in such a polarized, dividing kind of culture, that's oftentimes us versus them. And that creeps into the church as well. And so we try to actually subvert that kind of ideology and that feel as much as we can. And so we have we use our church, or I should say, our church is now being used in a lot of different ways, and by people that are not. It's not just Redeemer people. Let me give you an example of that. I mean, just last week, the past 2 weeks, our church facility has been used 6 out of 7 days. One night it was used by Celebrate Recovery, the folks who run Celebrate Recovery and this addiction program. They're not members of Redeemer,
Mhm.
but they have a heart and a passion, as do we, to help people, with addictions, overcome those addictions. We had two other groups use that on Thursday and Friday night for training. Organization called Lighthouse Via de Cristo, which is kind of like a group that's dedicated to doing these spiritual retreat weekends for both men and women. And so they've been doing a lot of their leadership training using our facility. And in a couple of weeks, they're going to actually use our facility again to do their send off for those particular weekends. Of course, we're using our church for small group community there as well. And then just recently, I had a personal trainer who said, "Hey, I'd really like to use your facility, because the body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and I'm really committed to helping people get healthy and fit." And so we said, "Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. Maybe I'll even join you one of these days." And so we're allowing them to use the facility to do that. And he goes to another church. He actually goes to the Grove Church up here in Titusville as well. Great guy. And so yeah, I mean, we're trying to do everything that we can to serve the community. We do not exist for ourselves. And as soon as we do exist for ourselves, then we cease to actually do the heartbeat that God has for us. And so we want to try to be as welcoming and as evangelistic and as open as we can be.
Yeah, I know when I visited, you were advertising your fall festival. That was just about to happen. I know now we were just talking before the podcast too. You guys do an annual bonfires
Yeah,
for the end of daylight savings time. So that's
yeah,
coming up on March 8th here.
yeah.
And that's open for anybody to attend.
Right.
I think what I really like about the idea of opening the church up for all these different types of events is, well, one, not only are you using a resource that you actually have, the building, that is very useful for the community, which is great. But I think the more that people can see the church, even just the church building, I mean, you have a steeple there with a cross, right? The more people that are engaged with that, even if they're just doing other things, other community events, or utilizing the space, they realize that Christianity is open to forming the local area. And I think we as Christians, the more we can think about participating with the community and participating in community events, the more we can engage people visually with what Christianity represents, which is that open heart and open doors.
Absolutely, yeah, I couldn't put it better myself, Connor. That's why you're doing the podcast and I'm being the interviewee.
And something else too is I've been diving a lot into the history of Brevard County, and a lot of our oldest churches. I don't know if you're familiar with Lagrange. It's the oldest church in Brevard County, and it was initially built in the 1800s to be a church, but also to be a community center. A lot of churches started that way, dual use, because they needed a meeting place for their assemblies. Churches really are the original community centers. It's a place for the body of Christ to gather, and the body of Christ includes, the community, right? So the more that people are formed within the church and within a church, the better I think it is for us. 6 days a week plus 7 days a week, including Sunday, right?
Yeah, we only had 1 day that week. That Monday was the only day when nobody used it. We gave it a break. 6 days shall you work, and on the
Yeah.
7th, it just happened to be the 7th day was on a Monday, so
So community engagement is great. Also, charity efforts, though, I find a lot, especially with smaller churches. We see all these needs that need to be addressed, but it's very difficult for us all to do them when they may not have the resources. And even if we did have the resources, we a lot of times will just duplicate efforts and not do it as well as when we're collaborating. So what you find a lot is there is a charity that's separate from the church that exists kind of independently, and it serves as a vehicle for churches to put resources into, and then they handle those types of needs, which I think is one way of doing things that can be good. I'm curious, with your time here in Titusville and working at Redeemer Church, have you seen any needs in the community that you wish that there was more support for?
yeah, I think, I've got a really good friend. His name is Trey Gordon. He runs Hope for North Brevard up here in Titusville. He's part of the North Brevard Coalition of Human Services. Actually, I think he's the president. One of the things that I know has been talked about for some time is the need for affordable housing. Um, we've got we've got a lot of people who have good, steady jobs, and make a good, steady wage. And yet the housing, both renting as well as trying to own, is just almost unattainable. And I'm talking about people who've actually got professions of nurses, and many others, educators who find it increasingly difficult. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that we have ahead of us is how can we come alongside of those who would love to aspire to home ownership or would love to have a great place to live, but it's just out of reach in their current status. And so I don't know what the answer is. I know a lot of people, a lot of smart people are trying to work on some answers right now and trying to meet that very specific need. But I think that's one of the biggest issues. I know up here in Titusville, we've got a lot of people who could really benefit from um, some more affordable housing, to put it quite honestly. So I don't know if you've heard that, if that's one of the things that's been going around and being talked about, but I know that that's a big, big thing in our county right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I have heard it before. I've had a couple other pastors that have mentioned affordable housing specifically, so yeah, I think you're right on target there. It's definitely a county-wide issue,
Yeah.
and it's a difficult one to solve. I'm not exactly sure what the solution is either, but the fact that we're all thinking about it, I think maybe we can find some sort of collaborative solution there for it.
Well, I think it's gonna take the church. I think it's gonna take businesses and banks. I think it's gonna take contractors and developers. There are probably gonna have to be some people who are gonna say, "You know what? This is big enough that I don't need to take as big a cut
Hmm.
of profit. I'm willing to sacrifice some profit
Hmm.
so that my community can thrive." At the end of the day, I think that's, whether it's the banks who or maybe it's some sort of joint effort between developers and contractors. I think it's going to have to be something along those lines.
Well, hopefully we've raised the awareness a little bit here for anybody who's listening, and we can find opportunities to collaborate on that sort of thing. Just as we close out, if you want to share a little bit about how people can maybe get in contact with Redeemer Church, I'm sure there's a lot of people up there in Titusville who aren't even attending a church right now, and they might be interested in it. So if you can let them know.
Sure. There's a couple of ways to get connected to Redeemer. Probably the best way to get connected to Redeemer is to join us for a worship service one Sunday morning at 10 a.m. We have just one worship service, and it's at 3580 South Park Avenue in Titusville. It's right off of Park Avenue, right across the street from North Brevard Church of Christ. You'll notice our building by its unique architecture. A lot of people used to skateboard on our roof because we had that crazy looking skateboard half pipe kind of roof. So that's one way to get connected. And the other is, of course, through our website, www.myredeemer.cc. You can get a little bit of information on the website about who we are. Hopefully, we'll update it soon before this podcast airs. Those are a couple of ways to get connected. And then you can call me personally. I don't mind fielding phone calls. So my number is 321-264-0035.
This podcast is going to air on the 7th, March 7th. So you guys will have a bonfire tomorrow on March 8th. What
That's
time is
right.
that?
It starts at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yep.
Well, thanks again, Pastor Gary, for joining us, and hope you have a great day.